All right. Basically, as I've told you, data in statistics are of two types. One, I just gave you, it is a discrete random variable. The other one is continuous random variable. So what's the biggest difference between discrete random variable and continuous random variable? Discrete random variable are variables that you can count. So you can count like 1, 2, 3, and therefore can be measured. For example, as I said, you throw the dice 20 times, and how many times you obtain 3? You can count. How many times you obtain 3? You can count 1, 2, 3 out of the 20 times. You toss a coin 100 times. How many times you obtain heads or tails? You can count. So this comes under discrete random variable. But at the same time, if you want to find the height of a person in your classroom, all right, you can count, but you can measure. That is continuous random variable. So height, weight are continuous random variable. So data is basically of two types. All right. Now the other type. The data that you collect can either be grouped. All right. Can either be grouped and put into a table. All right. And when you put into a table, you have what you call data in terms of class interval and individual data, but you can put it into a table, and that will be grouped data. Or you can put a data, you can just you can just arrange the data, or you don't need to arrange the data randomly. You can show all the data. That will be ungrouped data. So data, you have two types, group data and ungrouped data. So that also you need to know. What's a group data and what's an ungrouped data, you should know. As I said, the approach is very important. So the data, the group data can be divided into two types, with class interval or with no class interval. Okay, now let's let us compare, all right, the two types of data in terms of what we call three important statistical measure. All right, three important statistical measure, which are the central tendency measure. They are the central tendency measure. All right, what do you mean by central tendency measure? Your data centers around which of this statistical measure. So this is called the centering of your data. Your data sometimes, okay, although you have large amount of data, remember your understanding, although you have a large amount of data, but your data tends to move towards a certain point. It tends to move towards a certain value, and it tends to centralize at that value. That value is what? All right, that is called the central tendency measure. So in statistics, the central tendency measure is made up of three. You have the mode, you have the mean, you have the median. So the mode, the mean, and the median are what we call the measure of central tendency of a data. All right, so that is what we call that. There's a slight difference in calculating the mode, the median, and the mean for a group data and an ungrouped data. So the best way is to learn them in comparison. All right, so that means we look at it, we compare it directly. So you have ungrouped data and we have grouped data. Okay, and we have grouped data, ungrouped data and grouped data. So how do we measure the mean of a group data? So mean is also denoted with this symbol, all right? It is also denoted with this symbol. So mean is usually used as one of the measurement of central tendency. So the mean means you can also look at mean as the most expected value. That means of all the data, there will be certain data which are close to each other. All right, so they will have that. For example, you have a data that is spread from a value of 2 to a value of 100. Let's say this is what you call scores of students, value of 2 to a value of 100. But we find that most of the students have a score of, let's say, 60. So the 60 is more or less the centralized value of that score. That is roughly the idea of what a mean is, the expected value. That means even if you pick one student from the classroom, most probably the student will have a score of 60. That's the meaning of central tendency. Okay, so we are going to look at that, how for the two data. Okay, all right. Okay, now let's move on further. So what formulas? Okay, it's not just simply learning formulas. So the mean, all right, is the sum of all the values. So students must have the skill to write like this: x1 plus x2 plus then 3 dots followed by n. So from 1 to n values, and then divided by n. But this, all right, is simplified in the form of sigma notation like that. Okay, so you put back this the equal sign. It's always good to put the equal sign at the addition sign. So this is that. This is for what you call for ungrouped data. So for ungrouped data, that is how you find. Now, what happens if it's a group data? If you have a group data, then how will it be? Now, remember, your mean could also be written as x bar. All right, it's also customary to write mean in the form of x bar. So because in fact, quite often we use that, so we stick to that. Okay, so I equals to 1 and xi. All right, so that's all the symbols you need to use. Okay, now if it's a group data, well, if it's a group data, you have two: one, class interval, the other one without class interval. So let's talk about without class interval. So if you do not have a class interval, you have individual values. So let me put that. Okay, this is without class interval. So you will have, okay, values of x, values of x. So this will be x, x1, x2, x3, x4. So this, let's say this is a score. So this will be frequency. So the frequency will be f1, f2, f3, f4, and let's say you have xn. Please remember, there's a lot of understanding that's needed here. Okay, and then you have a data with class interval. So you must understand what is all this. So the same score can be presented in the form of x1 to x2. All right, and then x3 to x4, and so on and so forth. And then eventually you'll have xn minus 1 to xn. Let's see. So this is a frequency. So that's a frequency 1, frequency 2, so on, and frequency n. Okay? So you have two. This is the meaning of group, both are group data, but that is individual. And that is in the form of a class interval. So in the case of this, okay, so your mean is calculated using this multiplied by that. So it is x1, f1 plus x2, or I put rather the f in the front, okay? You can put either one, it doesn't matter. So I stick to the earlier one. Okay, f1 plus x2, f2, dot, 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 xn, fn, and the whole thing will be f1 plus f2, dot, 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 plus fn, which is simplified as, in the sigma notation, I equals to 1 and xi fi over sigma f. I equals to 1 and. So don't panic when you see all this. All right, this is the total frequency. Sometimes the total frequency is simplified with the letter n. All right, they use all that, doesn't matter. Your job is to understand how all these functions. So whatever way they twist and turn the question, you know how to understand it. All right, I need space for me to talk about this. So first take it down, whatever you need to take down first, just like that, take it down, and then I'll come back for the other one. All right, so now let us take a look at this. All right, so what if they have given you this one? Okay, what you are given this one. So if you are given this data, all right, the formula is similar. So your mean is equals to sigma f xi, where I equals to 1 n over sigma f. I equals to 1, and normally it is sometimes it is just simplified as x, okay, sigma n. So you can simply write, knowing that it is 1 to n, so no need to put all this down. But in right mathematics, you have to do that. Okay, all right. So I'm just simplifying it for you. So now the question is this x. For a class interval, this x is the midpoint of each class. So it's the midpoint of each class. That means x1, x2, you add up, divide by 2, get the midpoint. x3, x4, add up, divide by 2, get the midpoint. That is what you enter. The rest will be the same. That is what you must remember. Okay, this is if you are given a class interval. So first you got to know your subject matter well, all right? Okay. Now let's move on to the next central tendency. Put that part B. Okay, part B, calculation of median. We go for calculation of median. All right, so remember, median is the middle data. Among all the data you have in a spread of data, which data is the middle data, the central data, exactly at the center. That's the median. All right, so again, you have ungrouped data and a group data. So to find the median for this one, okay, arrange. You have to arrange the data in the ascending order. So it must be arranged in the ascending order. Now, here, when you group the data, you are already arranging in the ascending order. It will already be in the ascending order, so you don't need to redo it. Whereas here, it will be randomly arranged, so you got to rearrange it in the ascending order, so that you shouldn't forget. Then you need to know that your ungrouped data, you can have even number of data. So n is even, or you can have odd number of data where your n is equals to an odd number. N is the total number of data. N represents the total number of data. So n represents the total number of data. So in the case it's an even number, your median equals to, all right, you find data n over 2. You find data n over 2. That means you take, if this n is 20, 20 divided by 2. So you find the 10th data. You find the 10th data. Is that all? No. And then you find data n over 2 plus 1. Not n plus 1 over 2. Not n plus 1 over 2. It is n over 2 plus 1. You find for that data. You find for that data. So you take that and then you find the average of the two. So you divide that by 2. If you have an even number. So example, let's look at examples straight away. Okay, so let's say you have a data in the ascending order given to you is 2, 4, 5, 8, 9, 9, 10, and 11. This is the data that is given to you. And you are supposed to find the median. So you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So my n is equals to 8. That's the meaning of that. And it's an even number. So straight away you should know. I do it here. So straight away you should know my median is equivalent to half data 8 divided by 2 plus data 8 divided by 2 plus 1. Of course, the exam, you don't need to write step by step like that. But of course, when you're first learning, you have to do that way. So in other words, it's the fourth data you add with the fifth data, plus 1 means fifth data, and you find the average. So now you go back to your ascending order, start counting from the start. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that will be 8. The fourth data is 8. This is the value you use. This is just telling you what value to pick. In this arrangement, what value do I pick? What are the two values I should pick? That tells you. This tells you that. So I picked the fourth. Next will be the fifth, 9, and I divide by 2. Okay, so that will be 17 over 2, and my median is 8.5. So I get that. That's my median. All right, that's how I calculate my median. All right, so this is for that. Okay, so after this, I will give it to you for the odd number. All right. All right. Let's now look at the next one. So what if you have odd number of data? If you have odd number of data, your median is simply equals to, all right, so you find if it's odd number, if it's odd number of data, you just find the value of data n plus 1 over 2. You find the value of data n plus 1 over 2. Make sure you understand this statement. Value of data n plus 1 over 2. All right. That means, for example, let's say you have 7 data. That means your n is 7. Your n is 7, 7 data. So that's an odd number. So 7 plus 1, that will be 8. Divide by 2, that will be 4. So your median is the fourth data. Your median is the fourth data. So remember, you've already arranged it in the ascending order. Just go to the fourth data, that's the value. All right, that's what it means. So let me give you an example. So let's say the example, I put it here, I do it here. All right, this is ungrouped data, but I have no space. I'm going to put it here. So let's say the example is you are given the following data. Okay, you're given the following data, which is 2, 4, 5, 8, 9, 9, 10. Okay, 11 and 12. So you are required to find the median. So let's see how many data you have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I have 9 data. So that means my n is equals to 9. So what is my median? So my median is data 9 plus 1 over 2, which is the fifth data. So my median will be equivalent to, you now go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's my fifth data. My median is 9. That's my answer. All right? Okay. You can now take that down. All right. Now, let's continue, right? So, if you're given group data, so if you're given a group data, and let's say you are given a group data with no class interval, that means you have individual data with frequency. You follow exactly like what you did there. That means you find the sigma frequency. You find the sigma frequency, and then you see whether the sigma frequency is odd or even. If it is odd, you add 1, divide by 2, you'll get the data, which data it is, and then trace through the frequency and come to the data. We'll do an example and show you exactly how you solve it. But in the event you have the sigma f is an even number, then you have to take, as what I've told you earlier, exactly like that. You have to take the middle data and then you add 1 and then you find the average of it. So it is not a problem because basically it's the same as that. Now, the